I have 3 children from my first marriage. I decided to leave after the birth of my youngest child. The marriage was extremely difficult. My ex-husband was lazy and didn't look for work while spending my money. His attitude towards me was far from respectful. When he left me in the hospital for a week after giving birth and left me with money for cigarettes, preferring to play video games at home, I realized that change was inevitable. Especially after I found out about his affair with another woman I thought was just an acquaintance of his. My attitude towards him turned to hatred, intensified after his decision to cut off contact with the kids because of my new acquaintances. Since 2017, he has only seen the children a few times, mostly at his mother's house. We stopped communicating. Previously, my brother was involved with my ex, leaving me alone with the care of 2 children. This caused conflict and accusations of dramatizing the situation. My brother and my ex-husband remained friends after the breakup. Since my house was located only 5 minutes from his workplace, he often stayed overnight at my house and often mentioned my ex in conversation. I was annoyed by my ex's words, relayed through my brother, that I was preventing him from seeing his children. My brother's words that I should make more of an effort to see the children with both parents made me angry, especially when it was discussed in front of the children. I asked him to no longer mention this man's name in my home. I was tired of listening to daily rebukes about a situation he should not have been involved in. He often ignored my requests, and yesterday, when he started talking about my ex's depression and loneliness again, I once again asked him to stop. My ex's condition did not interest me. Despite my requests, my brother kept coming back to the topic. Finally, I asked him to leave my house, indicating that his presence here was no longer desired. He was surprised and said he couldn't believe I was kicking him out because of the conversation, despite the possible impact it might have on his work. The situation escalated to the point where I felt I had done the wrong thing by kicking my brother out. You didn't do wrong by kicking him out of your house. It wasn't the words, it was his behavior. It's not just what he said that matters, it's how he acted. If he didn't respect the boundaries you set, the right thing to do was to not allow his guilt-based manipulation. He was warned repeatedly and chose to ignore you, turning his guilt into a weapon against you by trying to play the victim. His argument that he can't get to work without staying with you doesn't hold up. Traveling more than 5 minutes to work is a common situation for most people. If he really cares about his job, he will find a way to get there on time without having to live in your house. This incident highlights a common trait between him and your ex, a tendency to shift responsibility for his problems onto others. If your brother really wants to help your ex, he should advise the latter to try harder for the sake of the children, rather than blaming you for his own failures. It may be worth considering more formal arrangements for child support and meetings with the children so that all interactions are clearly documented. This will help ensure the safety and well-being of the children in the long run. Next story. I celebrated my 53rd birthday and my spouse Abby celebrated 50 years. Our life journey together spans more than 30 years, 20 of which we have spent legally married. Our family was enriched by our adopted son Jack, who came into our lives as an infant after the tragic loss of his parents. Today, Jack is 20 years old. Jack's upbringing was accompanied by difficulties, but as a result he grew up to be a kind and responsible person. In school, he showed excellent academic achievement and good judgment. Jack never caused trouble with malicious intent and valued time spent together, loving to watch TV with us. As a teenager, he showed an interest in cooking and excelled in this area, reminding us of the famous chef Gordon Ramsay. The changes in our family life began after adopting our daughter before she was even born. By then, Jack was already a teenager. Our daughter was a difficult child after living in several foster homes. Nevertheless, Jack showed love for her and endeavored to create an atmosphere of safety and comfort in our home. Abby and I also endeavored to provide her with a similar atmosphere. It should be noted that we never assigned Jack the responsibility of raising our daughter, viewing it as our prerogative. However, he often offered to spend time with her, preferring her company to that of his friends. Without experience as a nanny, Jack could sometimes show irritation toward his sister in emergencies, but always assured us otherwise when discussing difficulties in dealing with her. After his 19th birthday, Jack met a girl who was 18 years old. From that point on, his behavior began to change. He began to show irritation toward us and toward Sam. At times, he would make strange or hostile remarks to Abby and me. Sometimes I could hear him telling Sam about her biological family. I tried to stop such conversations, but Jack would make excuses and leave the house. During a conversation about Jack's recent behavior, I expressed concern about Sam's contact with her biological family. I emphasized that these connections could be adverse and pose a threat to her well-being due to toxicity and potential danger from her relatives. During a morning conversation with my son along with his wife, he surprised us by stating that his girlfriend blamed us for isolating him from his family throughout his upbringing and for the adoption allegedly being a traumatic experience that separated him from his biological family. We were taken aback by these words as we had always tried to be as open and honest as possible. Communication with the remaining members of his biological family had failed, which led to the adoption. My wife attempted to explain that we never intended for this outcome, but our son responded by insulting her, accusing her of lying and even calling us child abductors. I immediately intervened, suggesting he leave the house until he was ready to apologize. He left, expressing the hope that Sam would someday realize the truth about her biological family and realize how badly we had done in separating her from her birth family. This logic seemed unfathomable to me, and his words caused a great deal of upset. I was extremely reluctant to kick him out, as I was eager to dialogue. However, when faced with the insults directed at the woman who had devoted most of her life to him, I could not stay away. In the moment, I acted as I saw fit, but I deeply regret the conflict that erupted. No, don't blame yourself for what you did. Your actions and words towards both children were right. By the age of 20, a person should have the ability to adequately control their behavior and speech. Your son had no right to treat you this way. Even at the age of 6, I already knew that it was unacceptable to speak to my parents that way. I don't think you should refuse the ultimatum. If he contacts you, you may be relieved or happy, but it is important to remain firm in your decision. He should apologize, and it should be sincere. Superficial apologies along the lines of "it's okay, I'm sorry" should not be allowed. It is important that he understands the reason for his apology and that it reflects that understanding. There may be other reasons for the change in his behavior that do not justify but may explain his actions. There is a social movement that is critical of adoption, and some of their arguments have merit, such as criticizing the practice of moving children for adoption. However, such views can be exaggerated and carried to the point of absurdity. Adoption is a much more complex process than many people realize, and in your family's case, it appears that the system has worked well. Your son's girlfriend plays a role in this, and I wonder where she gets her information from. Probably from the TikTok videos. There is a possibility that she is trying to isolate him and turn him against you, but that is only a guess. Your desire for understanding and hope that your son will return to reasonable views is respectable. However, I would advise keeping him at a distance from Sam. She has enough trauma in her life already, and she doesn't need to listen to his toxic remarks. Now I want to tell a different story. My daughter has a friend whom we will tentatively call Beth. Both girls are not yet teenagers, but they are beginning to understand the adult world. The rule in our house is that the children eat the same food as the adults, with no separate meals for the little ones. Because of this, my children develop a variety of tastes. For example, my son loves grilled octopus, and my daughter prefers pasta with sea urchin. Although they don't like every dish, I don't force them to eat anything they don't like. The basic rule is that they eat what's on the table. Unlike my kids, Beth is used to a kid's menu. Her family cooks separately for kids and adults, usually simple and familiar dishes like pizza or chicken nuggets without sauce. This girl is extremely picky about food. The first time I encountered her food preferences when my daughter and Beth spent the weekend with us, I was unprepared. Served dinner, fried chicken, Beth declined it, asking for crackers. In subsequent meetings, I tried to accommodate her tastes, but didn't always succeed. Even plain pasta without sauce was not to Beth's liking because the shape of the pasta was not what she was used to. Because of her picky eating habits, I started organizing their meetings so that they would end before dinner. Beth's parents noticed the change and asked about the reason. After explaining the situation, they suggested always having chicken nuggets in the freezer for Beth. However, I did not follow this advice as I did not want to cultivate the habit of demanding a special menu for my children. My refusal caused resentment from Beth's parents, and they decided to limit our daughter's socialization. I feel guilty about this. Making the decision to end friendly get-togethers before dinner proved to be a successful move, avoiding misunderstandings related to the diversity of culinary preferences. This measure helped to eliminate the anxiety that could arise from differences in perceptions of food, especially when it became a point of contention among parents. As a result, Beth's parents were challenged to interact more closely with their child during family dinners. Your confidence in your parenting methods deserves respect. You are investing effort in developing your children's flexibility in their culinary preferences and ability to adapt to a variety of meals in adulthood. It is important to note that special diets can only be justified if a child has certain health limitations. Nevertheless, expecting a homeowner to purchase and store specialized foods for a guest who visits their home regularly seems excessive. As a parent who also faces selectivity in their child's eating, I understand the complexity of the situation. However, it has never occurred to me to require others to customize their home menu to fit my child's unique preferences. This emphasizes that there is no need to make the extra commitment to provide specific foods for friends' children if it doesn't fit your family's usual diet. Do not allow the opinions and demands of other parents to impose guilt or an obligation to act contrary to your principles. The right of parents to take care of their children should not turn into pressure on others, especially when it comes to individual aspects such as nutrition. It may be better, in the long run, to limit communication with those who do not share your views on parenting and family values. My next story. My husband and I have been living together for 2 years. We have settled in a house bought with money inherited from my mother. My husband's mother often complains about the mess in our house. She addresses her criticism exclusively to me, although we live together. She also discusses the problem with others, which makes me uncomfortable. In doing so, she ignores that I am pregnant and continue to work while her son only works 2 night shifts every 2 weeks. Last week, an incident happened that was the final straw for me. During a family dinner, she began to chide me for the unkemptness of my house. Her speech lasted half an hour, after which she moved on to personal rebukes. I noted that her words sounded ironic and hypocritical, given that I don't live alone. After my response, she fell silent and my husband looked at me perplexed. The atmosphere at the table became tense. Soon my husband, apparently impressed by the situation, suddenly got up from the table and dinner was interrupted. At home, he flared up at me, accusing me of hurting his feelings. He felt that I had used an inappropriate moment to make remarks that could have protected him from conflict with his mother. Since then, he stopped talking to me and left to go to his brother's house. Over the course of several days, he has called me claiming that I used him as a means to retaliate against his mother, even though he was not involved in the conflict and did not deserve to be treated that way. Now, I feel guilty. You really don't deserve such accusations. Calling someone a lazy bum, especially in the presence of someone who may have contributed to the formation of such traits, seems unfair. Your actions don't raise any questions for me. In one aspect, your husband was not wrong in essentially becoming a tool in this situation. His lack of employment and reluctance to take on domestic duties, and his lack of support in the moments when his mother speaks out against you, makes you wonder. He seems to have assumed that you should take on the role of protector in their argument. This begs the question of what you get out of this relationship. At a minimum, it would be worth discussing limiting visits to your mother-in-law by setting a rule that she can only see her grandson when you visit her. You should also make it clear that any insults to you or the child will result in immediate departure. Her behavior suggesting that household duties are solely your area of responsibility smacks of unfairness and bias. The fact that your husband is standing by and not responding to her unfair and unpleasant remarks shows his inaction. He should have stood up for himself and reminded her that not only is this not his mother's home, but that he too is responsible for the dwelling. Your husband should reconsider his behavior, especially since you will soon have a child to care for. It's important that he realizes his role and begins to take an active role in the family, including taking care of the house and the baby. Hopefully, he will be able to grow up and take responsibility before the baby arrives. Otherwise, you may feel like you are taking care of 2 children at once. A story that really surprised me. I am 18 years old, a girl, and my father is 50. He often takes me out for rides in the afternoon. These rides are usually for an hour or 2, but often take much longer. Sometimes my plans don't coincide with his, and if I refuse to go, it doesn't change the situation. One day my father decided to visit a friend and insisted that I accompany him. I objected as I had an early exam the next day and needed to study and go to bed early. He assured me that we would be back quickly after a cup of coffee. I agreed, albeit reluctantly. We left in the afternoon and made the 50-minute drive. Upon arrival, my father met up with friends and I was pretty much unnoticed. I sat on the couch and tried to study from my phone. At 3 o'clock, I asked to go home for the first time. My father said we would leave after his coffee. At 4, I reminded him again. He replied, later. At 5 p.m., after the third request, he got angry and said we would stay for dinner. After dinner, I asked again to come back. He stated that we would leave after he finished drinking his beer. I reminded him of having to get up early and wanted to leave as soon as possible. He ordered another beer and I quietly called a cab, paying with my father's card. He noticed my absence an hour later. When he called, he found out that I was almost home and about to go to bed. This made him angry with me for leaving without warning and using his card. I just wanted to study for the exam and get a good rest. My father, on the other hand, wants me to spend more time with him. He thinks I'm not social enough. Sometimes he needs me to give him a ride home after meetings so he can have a drink. When I refuse to ride with him, he feels resentful and may even stop talking to me. You are a young person on the cusp of adulthood. You are only 18 years old. At this age, the desire for independence and self-realization becomes especially urgent, and the need to communicate with peers comes to the fore. Interacting with people who are much older than you may not always suit your interests and needs, especially when it comes to close family ties. Being in the role of being responsible for getting home safely after attending activities together puts an extra strain on you. At times like these, it can feel like school and personal interests take a back seat. It is important to find a way to express your dissatisfaction with this state of affairs. Communicate clearly and constructively that the current situation is causing tension in your relationship and needs to change to prevent possible damage to your rapport. Learning to say no is an important step towards self-sufficiency. It may cause frustration or even anger on your father's part, but it is vital to your personal development. You may have to find alternative ways to spend your time and ways to live independently, such as study meetings at the library or other extracurricular activities. Your life will be filled with a variety of people, some of whom may try to manipulate you, such as your father does. It is important to remain calm and polite while knowing how to assert your boundaries firmly and consistently. Refuse offers that compromise your personal comfort without engaging in conflict. As an adult, you have the right to manage your own time and make decisions that affect your life and future.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.